The strange scent hit me like an invisible slap the moment Claire placed the plate in front of me. It was my favorite dinner, chicken and mushroom sauce, but something was wrong. The sweet, chemical odor wafting from the food made me frown. I looked at my daughter suspiciously as she forced a smile. "I made it especially for you, Mom," she said in a voice that was trying to be affectionate but sounded hollow. Mark, my son-in-law, sat beside me, completely oblivious to what was happening, scrolling through his phone as usual. Without anyone noticing, with a subtle and calculated movement, I switched my plate with his. An hour later, Mark collapsed, unconscious, onto the table. Claire's screams echoed through the house. "Mark! Mark!" Her voice broke as she tried to wake him, but I already knew the truth. My own daughter had tried to poison me. My hands trembled as I watched the scene unfold before me. The man who had been eating my dinner lay motionless, his face pale, his lips slightly purple. Claire shook him desperately, but her eyes didn't show the genuine surprise she should have felt. It was panic, but the panic of someone who knew exactly what had happened. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics took Mark away while Claire followed, pretending to be the devastated wife. But I stayed in that kitchen, staring at the 2 empty plates, feeling my world fall apart. My daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much love after being widowed, had tried to kill me. And it had all started 3 days earlier, when I refused her the $200,000 she had asked for to expand her business. I vividly remembered that Tuesday afternoon. Claire had arrived at my house with a binder full of papers, charts, and financial projections. Her small clothing boutique was growing, she said, and she needed capital to open 2 more locations. "Mom, it's a safe investment. In 2 years, I'll double your money," she had insisted with that smile I had known since she was a child. But something in her eyes unsettled me. There was a desperation she was trying to hide behind her entrepreneurial enthusiasm. I had built my textile empire from scratch after my husband died 15 years ago. I knew how to recognize when someone was lying about numbers, when the accounts didn't add up, when there was more to a story. The documents Claire showed me were too perfect, too optimistic. The sales projections looked like they were pulled from a dream, not from market reality. But more than that, there was something in the way Mark watched her from the sofa, something in how they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. "Claire, my love," I had said in the softest voice I could manage, "business isn't done with emotions. These numbers don't convince me. I need more time to analyze them." Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished and was replaced by a cold expression I didn't recognize. "Time? Mom, I've been preparing this for months. You don't trust me." Her voice had risen a pitch, becoming sharper, more desperate. Mark had stood up from the sofa with calculated movements. "Mrs. Eleanor, with all due respect, Claire has worked very hard on this project. Perhaps we could consider at least a portion of the money as a show of family support." His voice sounded controlled, but there was something threatening in his words. It was the first time he had dared to contradict me directly in my own home. That night, after they left, I stayed up late thinking about the conversation. Something didn't fit. Claire had always been independent, proud of doing things for herself. Why now did she desperately need my money? Why was Mark so involved in pressuring me? I decided to do a little investigating on my own. The next day, I called my trusted accountant, David, who managed all my investments. "David, I need you to discreetly investigate the financial situation of Claire's boutique," I said. "Something doesn't smell right." David had been my right hand for years. He knew my instincts and never questioned my decisions. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'll have news for you in 2 days." While I waited for the results of the investigation, I observed my daughter and Mark more closely. They came to visit me every day, which was unusual for them. Claire seemed more nervous each time, and Mark was constantly on phone calls that he would end abruptly when I entered the room. There was a tension in the air you could cut with a knife. The night before the special dinner, David called me with news that confirmed my worst suspicions. "Mrs. Eleanor, Claire's boutique is bankrupt. She has debts of over $300,000. But there's something worse. Mark has a gambling problem. He owes money to very dangerous people." My heart sank. My child was in serious trouble. Now, sitting in that kitchen after they had taken an unconscious Mark away, it all made sense. They didn't want the money to expand the business. They needed it to save their lives. And when I said no, they decided to take a desperate measure. My own daughter had tried to kill me to inherit my fortune. The love I had felt for her for 37 years transformed into a mixture of horror and betrayal that burned inside me. Claire returned from the hospital 3 hours later, her eyes red and her makeup smeared. "Mark is stable, but the doctors don't understand what happened," she said in a trembling voice. "They say it was some kind of poisoning." She sat across from me at the kitchen table, in the very spot where it had all happened. Her hands shook as she tried to pour herself a glass of water. "Mom, I need you to tell me exactly what you cooked. The doctors need to know what ingredients you used." I looked her directly in the eye. "I didn't cook anything, Claire. You prepared that special dinner for me, remember?" Her face visibly paled. "Yes, but I used your ingredients, your usual recipe." There was a growing desperation in her voice that confirmed my suspicions. "Why did you switch the plates, Mom? Why did Mark end up eating your portion?" I stood up slowly from the chair, feeling every one of my 69 years in my bones. Because the smell seemed strange to me. "Honey, there was something in that food that shouldn't have been there." Claire avoided my gaze, pretending to check her phone. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mom. You're upset because of what happened. Maybe you should rest." But I couldn't rest. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. All my life, I had trusted my instincts, and now they were screaming at me that my own daughter had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. "Claire, look at me," I said in a firm voice. "Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't put anything strange in my food." She glanced up, but only for a second. "Of course not, Mom. How could you even think such a thing?" Her voice sounded offended, but there was something forced in her indignation. "I'm your daughter. I love you. I would never hurt you." Every word sounded hollow, like a poorly rehearsed script. That night, after Claire left for the hospital to be with Mark, I was alone in my house. The stillness was deafening. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I had lived in that house for 30 years, but for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I walked through the hallways I knew by heart, touching the family photographs that hung on the walls. Claire, as a little girl, smiling with no front teeth. Claire at her graduation, hugging me with pride. Claire at her wedding to Mark, radiant in her ivory dress. When had everything started to change? When had my sweet little girl turned into someone capable of trying to poison her own mother? I mentally reviewed the last few years. After Mark came into our lives, Claire had begun to change gradually. At first, it was small things. She would be late for our family dinners. She seemed more worried about money. She spoke less about her feelings and more about her business plans. Mark had appeared in her life 5 years ago, when she was 32. He was charming, well-dressed, always with a perfect smile and sweet words. But something about him had never quite sat right with me. There was a coldness behind his eyes that unsettled me. When I found out they had gotten married in secret, without even inviting me to the ceremony, I knew something was wrong. "It was spontaneous, Mom," Claire had said. "We decided to just do it, the two of us." But I knew my daughter had always dreamed of a big wedding, with all the family present. The following months were filled with excuses. Mark always had some new project, some promising investment that required money. Claire stopped visiting as often, and when she did, she seemed nervous, as if she were fulfilling an obligation rather than enjoying our time together. Our conversations became superficial, filled with uncomfortable silences. I vividly recalled a conversation we'd had 6 months ago. Claire had come for lunch but had barely touched her food. "Mom, have you ever felt trapped in your own life?" she had asked suddenly. Her question had surprised me. "What do you mean, honey?" She had played with her fork, avoiding my gaze. "Sometimes I feel like I have no control over anything, like someone else is making all the important decisions for me." At the time, I thought she was referring to the stress of her business, the normal pressures of adult life. But now, replaying that conversation, I realized she had been asking for help indirectly. Maybe Mark was already pressuring her, already manipulating her to ask me for money. Maybe my daughter had been a victim before she became a perpetrator. But that didn't justify what she had tried to do. Trying to poison your own mother was a line that could not be crossed, no matter the circumstances. As I wandered through my house that night, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened and go on with my life. The next day, Claire arrived early in the morning. She looked haggard, with deep dark circles under her eyes and disheveled hair. "Mark is still in the hospital," she said without even greeting me. "The doctors say it was poisoning from toxic plants. They're investigating what he could have eaten." She stared at me, searching for a reaction. "Mom, I have to ask you something directly. Are there any plants in your garden that could be toxic?" Her question confirmed she was trying to find an alternative explanation, something to absolve her of responsibility. "Claire, I don't have any toxic plants in my garden. I've been tending to the same flowers and herbs for decades. They've never poisoned anyone." My voice was colder than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "Then I don't understand what could have happened," she said, sitting down heavily on the sofa. "It's like someone put something in the food on purpose." Her words hung in the air between us like an unspoken accusation. We both knew the truth, but neither of us was ready to say it out loud yet. "Claire, enough with the lies," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. It was cold, firm, without the maternal love that had characterized every conversation with her for 37 years. "I know what you did. I know you put something in my food. I know you tried to poison me." The words shot out of my mouth like bullets, each one aimed directly at my daughter's heart. Her face transformed completely. The mask of concern fell away, revealing pure panic. "What are you talking about, Mom? You're crazy. You're making things up because you're upset." But her hands were trembling visibly, and she couldn't hold my gaze. "Why would I do something like that? You're my mother. I love you." I stood up from the sofa, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. "Because you desperately need money. Because Mark has gambling debts. Because your boutique is bankrupt and you owe money to dangerous people." Every word I spoke made her face grow paler. "Yes, Claire, I know everything. I did my research before giving you a final answer about the money." "No, no, no," she stammered, shaking her head frantically. "You don't know what you're talking about. My finances are perfect. My business is growing." But her voice was breaking with every word. "Mom, please, you can't believe these things. Someone is filling your head with lies." "Who, Claire? Who would be lying to me?" "My trusted accountant who has handled my investments for 15 years. The bank records that show your boutique hasn't turned a profit in 8 months?" My voice rose, charged with the anger I had been holding back for days. "Or maybe the private investigator I hired to follow Mark, who confirmed he frequents illegal casinos and owes over $500,000? Claire collapsed onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders began to shake. "Mom, you don't understand," she whispered through her sobs. "We're desperate. Those people don't forgive. They said if we don't pay soon, they would hurt us." She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I never wanted to hurt you. It was Mark's idea. He said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer." Her words hit me like a fist to the gut. My own daughter had planned my death. "What did you put in my food, Claire?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried an authority that allowed no evasion. "Tell me exactly what you put in my food." "Oleander," she mumbled, so quietly I could barely hear her. "Ground oleander leaves. Mark got them. He said it would look like a natural heart attack." Her confession filled the air between us like an invisible poison. "Mom, please, you have to understand. We had no other choice. They were going to kill us both." I sat down slowly, processing the magnitude of what I had just heard. My daughter had planned to kill me with oleander, one of the most toxic plants in existence. "And then what, Claire? After you killed me, what was supposed to happen?" My voice was strangely calm, as if I were discussing the weather and not my own planned murder. "We were going to inherit everything," she said, avoiding my eyes. "The house, the company, the investments. It was enough to pay off the debts and start over." She paused, as if realizing how monstrous her words sounded. "But Mom, I swear I didn't want to do it." "Mark pressured me. He said it was the only way to save us." "Mark pressured you?" I repeated, feeling rage build in my chest. "Claire, you are a grown woman. No one can pressure you into murdering your own mother." I stood up abruptly, walking to the window to put distance between us. Do you know what this means? Do you know what you've just confessed? Claire stood up too, approaching me with hesitant steps. Mom, please, you can't tell anyone. If you call the police, Mark and I will go to jail. And those dangerous people? They'll still be after us. Her hands reached for my arm, but I pulled away sharply. Please, we can find another solution. Lend me the money and we'll go far away. You'll never have to see us again. Lend you the money? My voice rose several octaves. After you tried to kill me? After you planned my death as if it were a business transaction? I spun around to face her directly. Claire, are you hearing yourself? Do you hear how absurd your request is? Mom, I'm your daughter, she said, her voice breaking. I'm the only thing you have in this world. If you turn me over to the police, you'll be completely alone. Her words were a mix of pleading and emotional threat. Do you really want that? Do you want to spend your last years with no family, knowing you destroyed your own daughter's life? Her emotional blackmail wounded me deeply, but it also filled me with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. Claire, you destroyed our relationship the moment you decided to poison me. I am not responsible for the consequences of your actions. I walked to the front door, pulling it wide open. I want you out of my house. Now. What are you going to do? She asked, panic evident in her voice. Are you going to call the police? Are you going to destroy your own family for revenge? She moved toward the door but stopped before leaving. Mom, think carefully. Once you make that decision, there's no going back. You'll lose us forever. I already lost you, I replied with a sadness that cut me to the bone. I lost you the moment you decided my death was an acceptable solution to your problems. I pointed outside. Leave, Claire. Leave before I do something we'll both regret. She stood on the threshold for a moment that felt like an eternity. Mom, if you do this, you'll be signing my death warrant. Those people don't forgive. Without the money, Mark and I will have nowhere to hide. Her final plea had a desperate tone that almost broke my resolve. You should have thought of that before you tried to murder me, I said, slowly closing the door. You should have thought of the consequences before you decided my life was worth less than your debts. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like the end of an era. I stood in the foyer, listening to Claire's footsteps hurrying away down the path. My legs trembled, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. I had thrown my own daughter out of my house after discovering she had tried to kill me. The reality of the situation hit me like an emotional avalanche. I ran out of my house like a fugitive, with no destination in mind, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. My 69-year-old legs automatically carried me to Brenda's house, my neighbor of 15 years. She was the only person in the world who could understand what I had just been through without judging me as an old woman who had lost her mind. I knocked on her door with desperate pounds, not caring that it was 11 o'clock at night. Brenda, please, open up. It's Eleanor. I need help. My voice was breaking between sobs I had been holding back for hours. When she finally opened the door, dressed in her purple robe with her hair in curlers, her expression immediately shifted from surprise to motherly concern. Eleanor? What happened, dear? She asked, pulling the door open wide. You're trembling. Come in right now. Her warm hands guided me to her living room, where she sat me on her favorite sofa while she prepared chamomile tea with quick, efficient movements. Brenda, you're not going to believe what just happened to me, I said, accepting the steaming mug in my trembling hands. My own daughter tried to poison me. Claire wanted to kill me for money. The words poured out like a flood I had been holding back for days. And when I confronted her, she confessed everything. She told me they put oleander in my food. Brenda sat across from me, taking my hands in hers, her honey-colored eyes filled with genuine horror. What are you saying, Eleanor? Claire tried to poison you? Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would make the situation even more real. Tell me everything from the beginning. Don't skip a single detail. Over the next hour, I recounted everything. The request for money, my suspicions, the special dinner, the plate swap, Mark collapsing, Claire's confession. Brenda listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her expression growing graver with every word I spoke. Eleanor, this is much more serious than you think, she said finally, getting up to pace the room. If Claire was capable of trying to poison you once, she could try again. Now that she knows you know the truth, you're a danger to her. She stopped in front of me, her arms crossed. You can't go back to your house alone. It's too dangerous. But what am I going to do, Brenda? I asked, feeling the weight of the situation crushing me. She's my daughter. In spite of everything, she's still my daughter. I can't just turn her over to the police. My tears fell into the teacup, mixing with the warm liquid. All my life I loved her, protected her, cared for her. How could it come to this? Brenda sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me in a hug I hadn't received in years. Honey, listen to me carefully. A mother's love doesn't mean you have to let them kill you. Claire made a terrible choice, and now she has to face the consequences. Her voice was firm, but warm. You didn't turn her into a murderer. She chose that path. But I'm so alone, Brenda. I sobbed against her shoulder. Claire is all the family I have left. If I report her, I'll be completely alone in this world. The reality of my situation hit me like an avalanche. I have no one else, no other children, no siblings. My parents died decades ago. You're not alone, she said with a determination that surprised me. You have me, and we are going to get through this together. She pulled away to look me directly in the eyes. Eleanor, for 15 years you've been more than a neighbor to me. You're the sister of my heart, and I am not going to let your own daughter hurt you. Her words touched me deeply. For all these years, I had been so focused on my relationship with Claire that I hadn't realized I had someone else who truly cared about me. But what can we do? I don't have concrete proof. I only have her confession, and she could deny everything. We have to be smart, she said, getting up to grab a notebook and a pen. First, we need to document everything that happened. Every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence we have. She started writing as she spoke. Second, we need to protect you. You cannot be alone until we sort this out. Do you really think she would try to hurt me again? I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. I mean, she knows that I know everything. It would be too obvious if something happened to me now. Brenda looked at me with a seriousness that chilled me to the bone. Eleanor, when someone crosses the line of trying to kill their own mother, we can no longer predict what else they are capable of. Claire is desperate, and desperate people make irrational decisions. She closed the notebook and sat across from me. Besides, from what you told me, she owes money to dangerous people. If she can't get your money the easy way, she might try to get it the hard way. The night passed slowly. Brenda insisted I sleep at her house, and for the first time in days, I felt safe. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face confessing she had tried to poison me. I saw the fake smile as she served me that special dinner. I saw years of manipulation I had ignored out of motherly love. At 6 a.m, Brenda was already up making breakfast. You got some sleep, but not enough, she said, serving me black coffee and toast. Today we have to make some important decisions. We can't let ourselves be paralyzed by fear or guilt. What do you propose? I asked, grateful for the normalcy of a morning routine after the nightmare of the previous night. Because honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. First, we're going to go to your house together so you can pack some things, she said, sitting across from me with her own cup of coffee. But we are going to be very careful. If we see any sign that Claire or Mark are nearby, we leave immediately. She took a sip of coffee before continuing. Second, we need to talk to someone who can help us legally. A lawyer, maybe the police. And if Claire was telling the truth about the dangerous people? I asked, feeling fear wash over me again. What if by reporting her, we're really sentencing her to death? The maternal guilt I had carried my whole life intensified. Brenda reached her hand across the table and took mine. Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. Claire and Mark created this situation. You are not responsible for the consequences of their choices. Your job as a mother does not include allowing them to murder you to save your daughter from her own mistakes. We returned to my house at 10 a.m, with Brenda walking beside me like a protective bodyguard. Her steps were decisive, and her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings for any sign of danger. If we see Mark's car or anything suspicious, we leave immediately. She reminded me for the third time as we walked up the path to my front door. The house felt different when we entered. It wasn't just my imagination. There was a heavy atmosphere, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the betrayal of the previous night. Brenda walked straight to the kitchen, while I stood frozen in the foyer, paralyzed by the memories of everything that had happened in these rooms. "Eleanor, get in here right now," Brenda yelled from the kitchen. Her voice had an urgency that made me run towards her. "Look at this. Look what I found." She was standing in front of the sink, holding something in her hands with a kitchen towel. It was a small glass jar, the kind used for spices, but it was labeled with handwriting I recognized immediately. It was Claire's calligraphy. "Ground oleander," the label read. Brenda held it carefully, avoiding direct contact. I found it hidden behind the other spices. "Your daughter left the evidence right here." My heart stopped completely. Seeing the physical proof of what Claire had done made everything feel even more real, more devastating. "She really did it," I murmured, feeling my legs turn to jelly. "She really brought poison into my house and put it in my food." "There's more," Brenda said, opening the cabinet systematically. "Look, here are used latex gloves in the trash. And this cloth has green residue on it, probably from the leaves she ground up." Every piece of evidence she found was like another stab to my heart. "Eleanor, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment impulse. This was planned, calculated, premeditated." Brenda started taking pictures of everything with her cell phone. "We need to document every piece of evidence before someone comes to destroy it," she explained, as she photographed the jar from different angles. "If Claire realizes she left these things here, she's going to come back to clean up her tracks." "What else could there be?" I asked, feeling a mix of horror and morbid curiosity. "What else could we find that shows us just how far they planned this?" I started checking my own cabinets, looking for anything out of place. "Let's check her room," Brenda suggested. "The room where she stayed when she came to visit. Maybe she left something there too." We went upstairs to the second floor, where Claire had spent so many nights during her childhood and youth. The room was still decorated just as she had left it when she moved in with Mark. Brenda went straight to the desk, checking drawers and papers. "There's something here," she said, pulling out a sheet of paper that was folded under a book. "It's a handwritten list." She unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. "Oleander get fresh leaves. Gloves, mortar, and pestle to crush. Opportunity, special dinner. After, call ambulance after 30 minutes. The list was written in Claire's clear, neat handwriting, the same handwriting I had seen on thousands of loving notes she wrote to me as a child. Seeing those words written in her own hand made reality hit me like an emotional tsunami. "It's a to-do list for my murder," I said, my voice breaking. "My daughter made a list of instructions to kill me." "There's more," Brenda continued, checking the rest of the paper. "It says here, we'll check if change is needed. Approximate liquid inheritance, 2.8 million. Mark's debts, 500,000. Enough left over for a new life. Eleanor, they calculated exactly how much money they would get from your death." I sat heavily on the bed where Claire had slept as a child. The same pink bedsheets she had chosen when she was 12 were still there, washed and ironed, waiting for her next visit. How could I have been so blind? I wondered aloud. How did I not see that my own daughter had turned into this? Brenda sat next to me, taking my hands in hers. "Because you're a mother who loves her daughter. Because you trusted her, as you should. You did nothing wrong, Eleanor. She chose this path." Her words were comforting, but they couldn't erase the guilt that was eating away at my soul. "Let's keep looking," she said softly. "The more evidence we have, the stronger we'll be when we decide what to do." We continued to search the room methodically. In the closet, behind old shoeboxes, Brenda found something that made our blood run cold. "Eleanor, come see this," she called, her voice trembling. In her hands, she held a manila envelope full of documents. "These are copies of your will, bank statements, insurance policies." She sorted through the papers one by one. "Here are handwritten calculations on how long it would take to liquidate your investments after your death." The envelope also contained something that broke me completely. A letter I had never seen, addressed to me, dated 3 weeks ago. "Dear Mom," the letter began in Claire's handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means something went wrong with our plan. I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you, but we had no other choice. Mark and I are in real danger, and your death was the only way to get the money quickly." Brenda continued reading the letter aloud. "Please, forgive me. I know it's terrible, but I hoped it would be quick and that you wouldn't suffer. The oleander we are going to use will cause a heart attack that will seem natural. The doctors will think it was age and stress. They will never know it was intentional." The letter went on with specific details about how they planned to dispose of the evidence, how they would act like a grieving daughter during the funeral, and how they would distribute the money once they received the inheritance. After paying off Mark's debts, we plan to move to another country where we can start over. Maybe Costa Rica or Panama, where our money will go further. "It's a complete manual on how to murder your mother and get away with it," Brenda said, disgust evident in her voice. "Eleanor, this proves it wasn't a desperate last-minute decision. They've been planning this for weeks." She folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. We also found a second sheet with detailed numbers and calculations. "Here's the complete financial plan," Brenda said, studying the numbers. They calculated exactly how much they needed to pay their debts, how much they would have left to live on, and even researched the cost of living in different countries. "This is chilling." "What else is in that envelope?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Each revelation was worse than the last, and I felt like I was discovering my daughter was a complete stranger. "There are receipts," Brenda said, pulling out several small slips of paper. A receipt from a nursery for special ornamental plants, a printed internet search on symptoms of oleander poisoning. "And this," she paused, looking at a paper with a shocked expression. "It's a search on how to act like a grieving relative to avoid police suspicion." The room was spinning around me. My daughter had not only planned to kill me, but had meticulously researched how to fake her grief over my death. "How could she have become this?" I murmured, feeling nauseous. "At what point did the sweet girl I raised turn into a calculating murderer?" "I don't know, Eleanor," Brenda answered with brutal honesty. "But what I do know is that we have enough evidence to prove this was premeditated. You can no longer have any doubts about what to do. This goes far beyond a mistake or a desperate decision." Brenda closed the envelope with all the evidence and looked at me with a determination I had never seen in her. "Eleanor, we need professional help immediately. This is no longer something we can handle on our own." Her voice was firm, but I could detect the fear she was trying to hide. "We have to call the police and a lawyer. There's no turning back now." "Wait," I said, panicking at the thought of involving the authorities. "Can't we try to solve this as a family first? Maybe if I confront Claire with all this evidence, we can reach some kind of agreement." I knew it sounded ridiculous, but the mother in me still clung to the hope that there was a solution that wouldn't completely destroy my daughter. Brenda took me by the shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. "Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. Your daughter wrote a detailed manual on how to murder you and get away with it. There is no family agreement possible here. This is attempted premeditated murder." Her voice softened, but remained just as firm. "If we don't do something now, the next time, she won't accidentally switch the plates. The next time, she'll make sure there are no mistakes." We went downstairs in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. When we reached the kitchen, Brenda started making phone calls. "Hello, I need the number for a criminal defense attorney who can handle an emergency," she said into the phone while I stood like a statue, still processing everything we had discovered. The lawyer we found, Mr. Roth, arrived at my house 2 hours later. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and a serious expression that inspired confidence. "Mrs. Eleanor," Brenda briefly explained the situation to me over the phone. "You can tell me everything from the beginning." He sat in my living room with a legal pad, ready to take detailed notes. I recounted the entire story one more time. The request for money, my suspicions, the research I did on their finances, the special dinner, the plate swap, Claire's confession, and finally, all the evidence we had found that morning. Mr. Roth took notes constantly, asking specific questions about dates, times, and details. "This is very serious," he said when I finished my story. "We have physical evidence of the poison, written documents proving premeditation, and a direct confession from the accused." He closed his notepad and looked at me gravely. "Mrs. Eleanor, This constitutes attempted murder in the first degree. Your daughter could face between 15 and 25 years in prison. The lawyer's words hit me like a sledgehammer. 25 years, I repeated, my voice breaking. My daughter could spend the rest of her life in prison. The reality of the legal consequences completely overwhelmed me. Isn't there some way to reduce the charges? Some way for this not to completely destroy her life? Mr. Roth looked at me with professional compassion. Ma'am, I understand she is your daughter, but we have to be realistic. The level of planning you describe, the documentary evidence, the fact that she researched specific methods of poisoning, all of this points to a highly premeditated crime. He paused before continuing. However, the fact that you survived could work in her favor in a plea negotiation. What if I don't press charges? I asked, clinging to any possibility of protecting Claire. What if I just let her go and never speak of this? I knew it was a desperate question, but I needed to know all my options. Brenda intervened before Mr. Roth could answer. Eleanor, are you listening to yourself? You want to let someone who tried to murder you go free so she can try again? Her voice held a frustration I had never heard directed at me before. And what about the next person Claire and Mark decide to rob or hurt when they run out of money? Mr. Roth nodded grimly. Brenda is right. Furthermore, legally speaking, now that we have knowledge of a crime, we are obligated to report it. If we don't, we could become accessories after the fact. He looked at me directly. Mrs. Eleanor, I understand this is devastating, but you have no legal choice here. We have to involve the authorities. What would be the next step? Brenda asked, taking control of the situation when she saw I was too overwhelmed to continue. What exactly do we need to do to proceed correctly? First, we need to preserve all the evidence, Mr. Roth explained. We can't touch anything else without gloves. We need the police to come and document the crime scene properly. He took out his cell phone. Second, we need to file a formal report. Third, we need to get a restraining order against Claire and Mark to protect Mrs. Eleanor. The word crime resonated in my mind like a funeral bell. My home had officially become a crime scene. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for my family was now evidence in an attempted murder case. How long will this whole process take? I asked, feeling my normal life slipping away forever. The legal process could take months, possibly years, Mr. Roth answered honestly. But the immediate protective measures should be in place within the next 24 hours. He looked at me seriously. Mrs. Eleanor, in the meantime, you cannot be alone. It's too dangerous. Do you have a safe place to stay? She can stay with me for as long as necessary. Brenda intervened immediately. My house has a security system, and I live on a busy street. It will be harder for Claire to try anything there. Her offer filled me with gratitude and relief. Mr. Roth began making the necessary calls. First, he called the police to report the crime and request they come to process the scene. Then he called the courthouse to begin the process for the restraining order. The police will be here in an hour, he informed us. They'll need to take formal statements from both of you and professionally photograph all the evidence. What's going to happen when they arrest Claire? I asked, feeling the reality of the situation become more concrete with every step we took. Are they going to show up at her house with sirens and handcuffs? Is it going to be public? Will she be on the news? It depends on how the police proceed, Mr. Roth explained. They might call her to turn herself in voluntarily, or they might go to arrest her directly. Given the level of premeditation, they will likely opt for a direct arrest. He paused. As for the media, we will try to keep this private, but I can't guarantee anything once it goes to court. The idea of the situation becoming public terrified me. People are going to know that my own daughter tried to kill me. The shame and humiliation added to the pain and betrayal I already felt. They're going to think I'm a terrible mother who raised a murderer. Brenda came over and hugged me tightly. People are going to see that you are a brave victim who had the courage to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing in the world. Her voice was firm and comforting, and anyone who judges you for Claire's actions isn't worth your concern. When the police arrived, everything became surreal. 2 detectives, a woman named Detective Miller and a man named Detective Evans, took control of my house. They photographed everything, packed the evidence in special bags, and took detailed statements from Brenda and me. Mrs. Eleanor, Detective Miller told me after reviewing all the evidence, this is one of the most well-documented cases of attempted homicide I have ever seen. Your daughter and son-in-law are going to face very serious charges. Her tone was professional but compassionate. I know this must be devastating for you, but you did the right thing by reporting it. The arrest took place at dawn the next day. Brenda and I were having breakfast in her kitchen when my cell phone rang. It was Detective Miller. Mrs. Eleanor, we've just arrested Claire at her residence. Mark is still in the hospital under police custody. Her voice was professional, but I could detect a certain satisfaction. Claire resisted arrest and denied everything initially, but when we showed her the evidence, she broke down completely. My hands shook so much I almost dropped the phone. Knowing my daughter was in a police cell brought a mixture of relief and devastation I didn't know how to process. What happens now? I asked, as Brenda took my free hand for support. There will be an arraignment this afternoon at 3 o'clock, the detective explained. You can attend if you wish, but it's not mandatory. We also want to inform you that we found more evidence at Claire's house. She had a whole notebook with detailed plans, including alternative ways to harm you if the poison didn't work. Those words hit me like a fist in the stomach. My daughter had not only planned to poison me, but she had backup plans to murder me in other ways. What kind of alternative plans? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I'd rather not go into detail over the phone, the detective replied diplomatically. But I can tell you, this confirms that the poisoning attempt was not a desperate impulse. It was part of a very elaborate plan to obtain your inheritance. She paused. Mrs. Eleanor, we also discovered that Mark owes money to more dangerous criminal organizations than we initially thought. After I hung up, I sat in silence for several minutes. Brenda respected my need to process the information without pressuring me to speak. Finally, I broke the silence. Brenda, I think I want to go to the hearing. I need to look her in the eye. I need to hear what she has to say now that she can't lie anymore. Are you sure? Brenda asked with concern. It's going to be very difficult emotionally. Seeing Claire in handcuffs, hearing the formal charges. She moved closer to me. You don't have to torture yourself by witnessing that. You can stay away and let justice take its course. No, I replied with a determination that surprised me. I've spent my whole life protecting her from the consequences of her actions. I was always the mother who fixed her problems, who defended her when she got into trouble, who gave her second chances. I stood up from the table, feeling a strange clarity. This time, I need to see her face the real consequences of what she did. We arrived at the courthouse 2 hours before the hearing. Mr. Roth met us at the entrance and explained exactly what to expect. Claire will enter in handcuffs and a prison uniform. The judge will read the formal charges: attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent. His voice was serious. Afterward, the defense attorney will ask for bail, and the prosecution will argue that she should remain in custody. When we entered the courtroom, my heart was beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. The room was cold and impersonal, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that gave it a somber look. I sat in the front row, with Brenda beside me and Mr. Roth behind us. When they brought Claire in, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was a mess, her face swollen from crying, and the orange jumpsuit made her look small and vulnerable. But what struck me most were her eyes. When she saw me sitting in the front row, her expression changed from sadness to something I can only describe as pure hatred. "Mom," she muttered as she passed near me, but her tone held no love or remorse. It held resentment, as if I were the one to blame for her current situation. "Are you really going to do this? Are you really going to destroy your own family?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Seeing my daughter in that situation broke my heart, but knowing she still blamed me for her actions confirmed I had made the right decision. Claire wasn't sorry. She was angry she had been caught. The judge, an older man named Judge Thompson, entered and the hearing began. "The State versus Claire Peterson," the clerk announced. "Charges of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent." When the prosecutor began to read the specific details of the charges, describing how Claire had planned my death, how she had researched methods of poisoning, how she had written detailed to-do lists. My daughter slumped in her chair. For the first time, she seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what she had done. "How do you plead?" the judge asked, looking directly at Claire. Her defense attorney, a young man who seemed overwhelmed by the gravity of the case, whispered something in her ear. "Not guilty," Claire said in a barely audible voice. But as the prosecutor began to present the evidence, the jar of oleander, the letter in her own handwriting, the internet searches, her face completely fell apart. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the defendant meticulously planned the murder of her own mother to obtain an inheritance of nearly $3 million. We have physical evidence, documents written by the accused, and a direct confession." He held up the envelope with all the evidence. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated murder that failed only by chance. The defense attorney tried to argue for bail, explaining that Claire was a mother, had no criminal record, and had been under extreme pressure from her husband's debts. But the prosecutor countered that someone capable of planning the murder of her own mother was an extreme danger to society. "Furthermore, Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "we found evidence that the defendant had alternative plans to murder the victim if the poisoning failed. This demonstrates a persistent determination to commit this crime." His words echoed through the courtroom like a death sentence. Throughout this legal exchange, Claire was staring at me constantly. But it wasn't the look of a repentant daughter asking her mother for forgiveness. It was the look of someone who felt betrayed, as if I had done something terrible to her by reporting her attempt to murder me. When the judge finally spoke, his voice filled the room with absolute authority. Given the premeditated nature of these crimes, the overwhelming evidence presented, and the fact that the victim is the defendant's own mother, I find that the defendant represents an extreme danger to the community. He looked directly at Claire. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Claire completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom!" she screamed as the officers led her away. "Mom, please, you can't do this. I'm your daughter, your only family." But I remained silent. Watching my daughter being led away in handcuffs was one of the most painful moments of my life, but also the most necessary. For the first time in 37 years, I didn't run to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. Mr. Roth walked us out of the courthouse. "Now comes the hard part," he explained. "The legal process is going to take months. Claire will probably try to negotiate a plea deal to reduce her sentence." He looked at me with compassion. "Eleanor, are you prepared for this? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better." "I'm prepared," I answered, and for the first time in days, I truly believed it. I'm prepared to do what I should have done years ago. Let Claire face the real consequences of her decisions. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, hearings, and increasingly disturbing revelations about my daughter's true nature. Mr. Roth kept me informed of every development in the case, and each new piece of evidence that emerged painted a portrait of Claire that I struggled to recognize as the child I had raised. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you about something we discovered," Mr. Roth said during one of our weekly meetings in his office. His expression was graver than usual, which was saying a lot given the seriousness of the case. "The investigation has revealed that this was not Claire's first attempt to harm someone for money." I froze in my chair. "What do you mean it wasn't the first attempt?" My voice was barely a whisper. "She's tried to poison someone else?" The possibility that my daughter was a serial killer terrified me more than I thought possible. "Not exactly poisoning," Mr. Roth explained carefully. "But they found evidence that 2 years ago, she deliberately caused her mother-in-law to fall down the stairs. The woman survived, but suffered serious injuries. At the time, everyone thought it was an accident." He opened a folder full of documents. They also discovered that Claire had been stealing money from elderly people in the neighborhood, offering to do their shopping and keeping the change. Each revelation was like another nail in the coffin of the daughter I thought I knew. "Why did no one tell me about these incidents?" I asked, feeling a mix of horror and shame. "Why didn't anyone come to me and say my daughter was hurting people?" "They were isolated incidents that seemed accidental or minor," Mr. Roth replied. "No one connected the dots until now. But the DA is using this pattern of behavior to show that Claire is a serial predator who preys on vulnerable people. He closed the folder and looked at me directly. Eleanor, this means she will likely receive a much harsher sentence than we originally thought. During those weeks, Claire tried to contact me multiple times from jail. Phone calls that I rejected, letters that Brenda intercepted before I could read them, and even attempts to send messages through other people. But I stood firm in my decision to have no contact with her. Aren't you curious what she has to say? Brenda asked me one afternoon as we burned another unopened letter from Claire in the fireplace. Don't you want to know if she's finally sorry? We were sitting in her garden, drinking tea, and watching the sunset. No, I replied with a certainty that surprised me. Because I know she isn't sorry for the crime. She's sorry she got caught. I took a sip of my tea, feeling a calm I hadn't experienced in years. Her entire life, Claire has used the right words to manipulate my emotions. I'm not giving her another chance to do it. The real final confrontation came when Mark finally recovered enough to be questioned. Mr. Roth called me after he testified to the DA's office. Eleanor, Mark confessed to everything, he said, his voice a mix of satisfaction and disgust, but he tried to put all the blame on Claire. He says she planned everything, and he just followed her orders out of fear. And do you believe him? I asked, though I already suspected what his answer would be. After everything I had discovered about my daughter, nothing would surprise me anymore. The evidence suggests they were both equally guilty, Mr. Roth responded. But there's something interesting. Mark says that Claire had planned to poison him too, after she killed you. Apparently, she wanted the entire inheritance for herself. The revelation left me speechless. My daughter had planned to murder both her mother and her husband to keep all the money. 2 weeks later, the moment I had been both dreading and waiting for arrived. The plea hearing. Mr. Roth had explained that Claire had decided to accept a deal with the prosecution to avoid a trial. She is going to plead guilty to attempted murder in the second degree in exchange for a sentence of 15 years without the possibility of parole, he explained. 15 years, I repeated, processing what that meant. My daughter is going to spend the next 15 years in prison. The reality of the situation hit me like an avalanche. When she gets out, I probably won't be alive to see it. It's possible, Mr. Roth admitted gently, but it's also possible that these years in prison will give her time to truly reflect on what she did. Maybe when she gets out, she'll be a different person. His optimism sounded forced, but I appreciated the attempt. The plea hearing was completely different from the first one. This time, Claire looked resigned instead of defiant. When the judge asked if she understood the charges against her, she answered with a nearly inaudible yes. When he asked if she was pleading guilty voluntarily, there was a long pause before she whispered, "Guilty." But it was during the victim impact statement that I was finally able to say everything I had been holding in for months. The judge gave me the opportunity to speak directly to my daughter before he passed sentence. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every one of my 69 years. I looked Claire directly in the eyes for the first time since her arrest. "Claire," I began, my voice steady. "For 37 years, I loved you unconditionally. I protected you, I defended you, and I forgave you for everything. But I cannot forgive you for planning to murder me for money." Claire began to cry, but I continued. "Don't cry for yourself. Cry for the mother you lost when you decided my life was worth less than your debts. Cry for the relationship you destroyed when you chose poison over honesty." My voice grew stronger with every word. "And cry for the woman you became, because that woman is not the daughter I raised." "Mom, please," Claire muttered, but I raised my hand to silence her. "I am not your mother," I said with a finality that surprised even me. "A daughter who plans to murder her mother has given up the right to call her mom." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I request that the defendant be prohibited from any contact with me during and after her incarceration. I do not want to receive letters, calls, or messages of any kind." The judge nodded gravely. "So ordered," he said, and then turned to Claire. "Miss Peterson, for the crime of attempted murder in the second degree, I sentence you to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Furthermore, you are prohibited from any and all contact with the victim for the remainder of your life." The sound of the gavel was final. Claire was led away in handcuffs one more time, but this time she didn't scream my name. This time, she just went silently, and I knew it was the last time I would ever see her. A year after the trial, my life had completely changed, but in ways I never would have imagined. I sold my textile company to a corporation that had been interested in buying it for years, getting far more money than I would ever need for the rest of my life. With those funds, I bought a small but beautiful house just 3 blocks from Brenda, who had become the sister I never had. "Do you regret it?" Brenda asked me one afternoon as we drank coffee in my new kitchen. It was a question she had asked several times over the year, and my answer was always the same. "Do you regret reporting Claire?" "No," I replied without hesitation, looking out the window at my small garden where I had planted new flowers. "I regret failing her as a mother for so many years. I regret not setting boundaries when she was young. I regret not seeing the signs that she was turning into someone capable of this." I took a sip of coffee, but I don't regret stopping her before she hurt more people. Life without Claire had been surprisingly liberating. For decades, I had lived with the constant worry of what problem I would have to solve next, what lie I would have to believe, what behavior I would have to excuse. Now, for the first time in years, I slept soundly every night. "Detective Miller called me yesterday," I told Brenda, recalling the phone conversation. "She told me they arrested the people who lent Mark the money. Apparently, my report helped uncover a whole network of illegal loan sharks who were extorting families in the city." I felt a strange pride that something good had come out of this whole tragedy. Brenda smiled with satisfaction. "You see, Eleanor? By doing the right thing, you didn't just protect yourself, you protected other families who could have gone through the same thing." She reached out to take my hand. "You are stronger and braver than you think." During those months, I had also started volunteering at a help center for victims of domestic violence. It turned out that my experience with Claire had given me a unique perspective on how family manipulation can escalate to dangerous levels. "It's incredible how many women have similar stories," I remarked to Brenda after one of my days at the center. "Stories of children trying to hurt their parents?" Brenda asked, surprised. "I thought your case was unique in its horror." "Not exactly that," I explained, "but stories of family using love and guilt to manipulate and control. Adult children who emotionally blackmail their parents, who isolate them from friends, who make them feel guilty for setting boundaries." I realized how much I had learned about patterns of abuse. In my case, it went all the way to attempted murder, but the pattern of manipulation had been there for years. One afternoon, while organizing some of my belongings I had brought from the old house, I found a box full of family photos. They were pictures of Claire from a baby to an adult, capturing moments I once considered precious. Brenda found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by those memories. "What are you going to do with them?" she asked, gently, sitting beside me. She knew this decision had been weighing on my mind for months. "I'm going to keep some from when she was a little girl," I said, carefully separating the photos. "That little girl really existed, and she deserves to be remembered." I set aside the photos of Claire after the age of 20, but the woman she became, that person is not someone I want to remember. The ritual of selecting which memories to keep and which to discard was surprisingly healing. It was like separating the daughter I had loved from the woman who had tried to kill me. "You know what's the saddest part?" I asked Brenda as we burned the discarded photos in the fireplace. "That I'll probably never know the exact moment I lost her. The moment the sweet little girl turned into someone capable of planning my death." "Maybe it doesn't matter," Brenda replied, watching the flames consume the images. "What matters is that you stopped her before it was too late, and that you found the strength to choose your own life over her manipulation." 6 months later, I received unexpected news. Mr. Roth called to inform me that Claire had been attacked in prison by other inmates who had found out she had tried to kill her own mother. "She's in the prison hospital," he explained. "The injuries aren't fatal, but she's in serious condition. Legally, I have to inform you because you are technically still her next of kin." The news affected me less than I expected. "Is she asking to see me?" I asked, though I already knew what my answer would be, no matter what he said. "Yes," Mr. Roth admitted. "She says she needs to talk to you about something important related to the case. But Eleanor, you have no obligation to see her. The no-contact order is still in effect, unless you specifically lift it." "I'm not going," I said without hesitation. "Whatever she has to say, she can say it through her lawyers. I'm done rescuing her from the consequences of her actions." I hung up the phone feeling a peace that confirmed I had made the right decision. That evening, Brenda and I made a special dinner to celebrate what we had started calling my rebirth. It was exactly 1 year since I had made the decision to report Claire, and I wanted to mark it as the moment I had chosen my own life over family manipulation. "You know what's most ironic?" I said to Brenda as we toasted with red wine. "Claire spent so much time trying to get my money that she never realized what was truly valuable in my life." I looked around my new home, small but filled with peace. The quiet, the safety, the ability to trust the people around me. "And real friendship," Brenda added, clinking her glass against mine. "The friendship that doesn't come with conditions or manipulations or requests for money." Her smile was warm and genuine, so different from the calculated smiles I had received from Claire for years. As we finished dinner, I realized something I hadn't articulated before. "Brenda, I think for the first time in my adult life I'm truly happy." The words came out with a surprising clarity. I'm not worried about what problem Claire will bring next. I'm not walking on eggshells to avoid triggering a tantrum. I'm not feeling guilty for things I didn't do. "You look different," Brenda observed. "You look free." And she was right. I felt free in a way I hadn't experienced since Claire was a small child. That night, before going to sleep, I wrote in the journal I had started keeping after the trial. "Today marks 1 year since I chose to save my own life. 1 year since I decided I deserved to live without fear, without manipulation, without having to buy love with money or silence. Claire tried to kill me to get my inheritance, but in the end, she gave me the greatest gift of all, my freedom." I closed the journal and looked out the window toward Brenda's house, where I could see a light on in her kitchen. I knew that if I needed her, I just had to walk across the street. For the first time in decades, I had a real family, a chosen family, based on mutual respect and genuine love, not on blood obligations or emotional blackmail. At 70 years old, I had finally found my real home. It wasn't a large house filled with painful memories, but a small, safe place where I could be myself without fear, where no one was going to try to poison my food, where every day was a chance to live in peace. "Now," I murmured to myself before turning off the light, "I am truly home."